freedom isn't always about necessarily being somewhere else, right? People think that freedom exists in other places. I'm not here because I had to be. We are our choices. I chose to be here. I chose to take action from the inside so I could express who I am and maybe, just maybe, even help change something.
Welcome, I'm Matteo Donelli. I'm a journalist and I lived abroad for many years. And this is Stories of Italian Taste. The video podcast produced by Pindarica Communication, telling the stories of the people, families and businesses that have shaped the Italian food and wine heritage. Because behind every flavor, there's always a story worth hearing. We are in Gaida, along the Via Emilia, the heart of Italy's food valley. This is where the story of Montanari and Gruzza begins, a company where butter and Parmigiano-Reggiano are truly an art form. Our guest here represents the third generation at the heart of this story. A manager by profession, a singer by passion, and that's no coincidence, because her story is all about the desire to always find her own voice, both inside and outside the company. Today we are here with Margherita Montanari. Welcome, Margherita.
Thank you, Matteo, for the invitation.
One of the features of this video podcast is that we record it right where food is made. And here we are, inside Montanari and Gruzza. So thank you for the invitation, and above all, thank you for truly welcoming us to such a wonderful place.
It's a pleasure, and I'm happy to welcome you here, where the cheese really ages.
Margherita, if you had to describe your story with a flavor, which one would you choose? Sweet, salty, bitter, or spicy?
Well, the flavor that immediately comes to mind is definitely a bold, intense one that encompasses all the tastes you mentioned. But joining Montanari Gruzza certainly had a strong impact, and the flavor is just as intense as that of Parmigiano-Reggiano.
And here it is. You mentioned many flavors. You also spoke about such a complex story, that of Montanari and Gruzza. What does it mean to you to have joined such a complex company?
Well, I would say it was a natural process. Ever since I was a child, I heard so many sounds, so many smells, family life blending with that of the company. We would hear the trucks being loaded in the morning, my father shouting, the forklifts. So they were two worlds, two dimensions that were interconnected, always close to each other.
Was there a moment when you realized that the company would be your path? I know there was a donka, which means so in the Emilian dialect, said by your father.
Yes, that donka, said by my father, really struck my conscience. I think I've always had a very, very strong conscience. I've always felt it deeply, and he knew it, he understood, and he asked me to stay in the company. So, that was the moment when, after so much wandering, even though I had studied languages, I could have been anywhere. I would have liked to travel, to work abroad. And yet, in the end, I stayed. Here I am.
Because you wrote so many resumes, you rewrote them, you updated them, but in the end, you never actually sent one out. Did you ever imagine what you would have been like if you hadn't stayed at Montanari Gruzza?
Absolutely. I've imagined it many times. But I've also thought that freedom isn't always necessarily about being somewhere else, right? People think that freedom exists in other places. I could have written my future in other places too, but I chose to stay because I believe we can write our own story through the choices we make, even in places where we feel destined to be. I'm not here because I had to be. I'm here because I chose to be. We are our choices. I chose to be here. I chose to take action from the inside so I could express who I am and maybe, just maybe, even help change something.
Writing your story, writing the story of Montanari Gruzza, really took a lot of commitment, a strong desire to succeed on your part and on the part of your families. But what was the baptism by fire moment that you remember?
At the time, I hadn't been working at Montanari Gruzza for very long. I was very young and I didn't have much experience. And then there was an issue with a foreign client, specifically a British one, who got really upset over a dispute. I was asked to represent the company in London in front of the client, who at that moment was furious because of the dispute, to explain the issue and try to resolve it. I flew to London and back in a single day, and in that moment I truly felt I had been given a role, something meaningful. I felt that the company trusted me and that I had to show them they were right too. The dispute got resolved, and honestly, that moment kind of flipped a switch for me. It helped me feel more confident and, with time, more independent.
I know that in your family, saying well done is something rare. Did you recognize yourself in that moment? Did you gain the strength from that achievement to say, okay, I can hold this role within Montanari Gruzza?
If I'm being honest, I didn't get any well done even afterwards. Because saying well done isn't something we do here. It wasn't done before, and it still isn't done now. But yes, internally within myself, because confidence, your own, and even self-esteem, if you will, have to come from within. But that was when I began to feel more confident about my direction.
The company is growing, and the Montanari Gruzza brand is recognized both nationally and internationally. Surely, as in every company, there must have also been some bitter moments. Is there one in particular that you can tell us about?
One that I remember, which was a tragic event, happened at the beginning of the 2000s when my father's business partner passed away, one of the two partners. But Giordano Gruzza was my father's right-hand man. He passed away suddenly, and for my father, and really for the whole company, this created a void, a huge void.
A void certainly on a business level, but also a human one. How did you manage to turn the page?
Well, I'd say that, like in many things, after a big fall and a tough moment, we picked ourselves back up thanks to teamwork, everyone together, because that's really the only way a company made up of so many people can move forward. And here, I'm pleased to mention someone, Carlo Ponteroli, let's say our production manager, though that title doesn't do him justice. He is the deus ex machina of our butter factory, so he's responsible for all the butter. He grew up with us, and it's also thanks to him and everything he brings that we became who we are today. So this is what I really want to highlight right now. Teamwork, everyone's contribution, has the power to create success.
Let's talk about Montanari Gruzza, about how it entered the market. Certainly anyone who works in the food industry knows that one of the toughest battlegrounds is the relationship with large-scale retail. How was it for you?
Well, it was up to me. Yes, it really was up to me to take care of it right from the very beginning of my career, from the first years when I was very young, and to go into the offices of these buyers, the so-called buyers of the large-scale retail chains who were all in Milan, by the way, in big office buildings. So I always stepped in with a deep sense of reverence mixed with fear and the weight, the responsibility of representing my family name.
And it certainly wasn't easy because you had an important name behind you. You were just starting out and you had to go talk to these people who were really tough and challenging, even for people with experience. How did you manage to do it, to get results?
At a certain point, I realized that I needed to have mastery over what I was going to talk about, to say and to propose, because I had to know a lot. So I did my research and I studied the product, the techniques. I didn't have a background in agri-food. I hadn't studied agriculture. So at first, it was extremely important for me to learn more about the product.
But you didn't join the company unprepared because you have an executive MBA, which certainly gave you a truly important and solid technical foundation. What did your technical studies give you? And what, on the other hand, did you gain from studying the product and from the humility of starting from the bottom?
For me, it was what you'd call in master's jargon, a learning on the job kind of experience. So thanks to the people who had been here longer, I learned from those with more experience, and always with a deep sense of respect as someone young who was just starting out. So yeah, that was the beginning. The master's program came later, and at a certain point, I felt the need to connect all this hands-on experience, this practical learning in the field, with some theory. I needed to close this circle, and the master's program gave me many tools to understand, above all, what added value I could bring to the company and what perhaps the company is not yet ready to embrace today.
As you've seen in our podcast, we talk about flavors. So, we talked about the bitter taste. Now we'd like to talk about the sweet taste, and for that we have to refer to another donka.
Yes, exactly. My father, Leonida, was definitely the man of the donka, and when he spoke, you could really feel it. When I was 20, I fell in love with someone older than me, a man who is still my husband today and the father of our 2 children. But at the time, my father just wouldn't accept it. Out of love for Fabio, I wanted to stay, and to stop that from happening, my father tried opening a branch in the United States, or rather, he suggested sending me there directly. But I didn't accept. As I already mentioned, Fabio is still here, and now he's even our sales manager. We've built a beautiful family, and today my father has enormous trust in him.
Speaking of the supply chain, you even considered opening in the US. It didn't happen, but now you have an international market. Still, would you say you're rooted in the Via Emilia, in this land?
Yes, we were established on the Via Emilia, even if today it's no longer officially called that. We started out in Sant'Ilario and now we're in Gaida, but we're still here. For us, the Via Emilia is a source of value, of wealth, and of everything the land has to offer. But above all, it's about the people who live here, the community, just as much as the land itself, of course.
And then, there are the people of this land where nowadays we talk about contracts, about international agreements to formalize every relationship. But maybe the most important things are still understood through a glance. It seems to me that this is also part of the Montanari and Gruzza. What did those unspoken understandings mean for the company?
They meant building over time a reputation and reliability that couldn't be replaced by anyone else. So that was our, let's say, our competitive factor as well. Today we might call it a competitive factor, but really it was about building everything we did, our whole craft, on relationships. Yeah, my father always said, my word is as good as a deed, and that's how we've always done things, with handshakes. And even now we have many suppliers who believe in us. That's the most important thing.
So that's the DNA of Montanari Gruzza. Speaking of today, there's a lot of talk about sustainability. And Montanari and Gruzza stands for products that, of course, are deeply rooted in tradition. I know you've recently published your first report, which I see as a really important step for a company like yours. It's a word that everyone uses nowadays, just like everyone talks about the circular economy. In practical terms, what does it mean for you?
An interesting fact that I would also like to share and explain to who's listening is that Parmigiano-Reggiano is already based on a circular economy. Because from the same milk we obtain cheese, but we also get cream, which should be, let's say, a byproduct, a leftover as we call it, but with which we make our butter. So these are two completely interconnected productions, and in the end you have the whey, which you can use, for example, to feed pigs, make ricotta, or let's say start the production of Parmigiano for the next day. So this is very interesting.
So Montanari and Gruzza is a brand, but what is behind these two names? They are two different families, right? How are they currently working together?
They are two families who have always remained in harmony, and that's still the case today. And today, all the family members, from the older generations to the younger ones, play an active role in running the company. So we are a company without managers, where the family members hold the most important, crucial roles.
What is the battitore di forme? Who's that?
Well, certainly, without the battitore, a Parmigiano-Reggiano company couldn't exist. Fortunately, we have one right within the owning families, Arnaldo Gruzza, known as Ado, who has a degree in philosophy, but also has this great passion and expertise. He too has acquired a vast knowledge of Parmigiano, so he is a true expert on the cheese. He taps the cheese, listens to the sounds, and is able to recognize its quality.
You mentioned the battitore di forme, but we definitely have to talk about President Leonida, your father, a person who has done so much for this company. I interviewed him 4 years ago for the book Made in Italy. And what struck me was how you, his children, still have such a strong, almost reverential bond with him.
It's true. First of all, you are one of the very few who have had the honor of interviewing him. I was the link between them, and I was very pleased that my father agreed to it. I say agreed since he had shared so much about himself.
It was truly a wonderful day.
In fact, I also remember it as a beautiful day. My father, someone I would describe as authoritative, at times even authoritarian, my father, this character, this immense personality, has always been strongly felt. But it was he who, at a certain point, had the most important intuitions, the crucial ones, the ones that marked the real turning points for the company.
And I remember those truly beautiful silences when he spoke and everyone fell quiet. In those moments during the interview, I really sensed this beauty of being able to listen to him, especially from you, his children.
He had a great power of assertiveness as well. When he spoke, others listened and usually agreed with him, but it wasn't because they had to. It was always that kind of relationship. It was his authority. He is a great figure.
And your brother has the same kind of relationship with your father. What role does your brother have today?
Well, today my brother has a very important role within the company. He has great intuition, a remarkable ability to read the market, which is essential in this sector. But above all, he has the nature of a true merchant. So, as they used to say, the art of negotiation. My brother has it. He's a natural-born merchant, and around here he plays that role, and that's something you need too.
And it's exactly these old-school merchants who know how to pass on their approach to the company and its people, like how to turn problems into opportunities. Do you have any stories you can share with us?
Well, there's one in particular that I think is quite interesting. I think it was around 2007. We were about to launch a product on the American market that was really supposed to be a big success. It was an organic Parmigiano-Reggiano, organic with certifications, an American doctor who would vouch for its quality. It was supposed to be aged for 36 months, so it had a lot of quality advantages. At a certain point before the launch, the product is no longer suitable. The importer doesn't like it anymore. Or rather, he says that the placement he had in mind is too high. He did some analysis and it won't sell. So the deal doesn't go through and the product just sits there on the shelf in the warehouse, aged 36 months.
There must have been a lot of panic in the company.
Parmigiano-Reggiano cheese is wonderful for aging. It can mature even for 100 months, as we know today. But back then, we didn't know that. And leaving wheels there back then meant letting them grow old, maybe even spoil. We had no idea. So there was apprehension, waiting. Then when it was getting close to 60 months, I'd say maybe 48 or 50, we said, let's open a wheel. What will it be like? So we opened it, we tasted it, and it was good. Probably an even better cheese.
What a surprise. That's wonderful.
Yes, and not all milk is suitable to become that kind of cheese, so evidently that particular supply chain also allowed for that kind of aging.
So, what came out of it?
Well, that gave rise to one of our flagship products, still one of the standouts in our range today, the Organic 60-month in a green box, a big 60 like that, still highly appreciated in large-scale retail.
So it all started by chance.
Yes, from a problem, an opportunity. It really was a special moment for us, one we still remember fondly, and to this day, we still love that product.
What's the relationship today between the market, emerging trends, and how people are starting to perceive new ways of cooking and eating?
Consumers today are more and more attentive to what they eat. They're informed, they're conscious, and they expect transparency from the companies that present and sell them products. But above all, nowadays, people eat less and eat better. So many consumers are paying attention to their own well-being. They want to do good for themselves. They want to do good, and often they also want to do good for the planet. So there is also an ethical aspect to all of this. But certainly today, the issues related to the nutritional value of products are absolutely the most important.
So eating well, eating better, does that ever clash with the need for growing revenues? Montanari Gruzza, also in terms of size, can you give us numbers, some figures?
We're 90 people, and in 2024, we made about 150 million in revenue. So we are definitely a company that has grown in terms of revenue. We have remained a family-run and family-structured business, but certainly what we see today is a market that is changing at a frantic pace.
And how does Montanari Gruzza interpret this acceleration? Is it looking to follow trends? What kind of company do you see it becoming in the future?
I expect Montanari Gruzza to certainly follow market trends. Our niches, our specialties, and butter, which is our main activity, we absolutely must continue to pursue it. So a high diversification of product ranges, but certainly a company that will also have to follow new trends such as greater digitalization for increased efficiency, an open company, therefore a company inclined toward change and innovation, which also means a lot of research, development, and studies. A company that will move a bit away from a traditional owner-managed structure, but without losing its traditional and family-oriented spirit.
Because this word owner-managed, in many cases, it scares people. What does this word mean to you?
Let's say that for us, owner-managed has always meant having someone who looked out for everyone. A family with a head, yes, but always united. A place where everyone's voice mattered.
And today, in this so-called journey of change, where are we at? Where are you at?
I started, you could say, from the ground up. I've done and still do an office job alongside my colleagues, both women and men. So I enjoy working with everyone, having open conversations, and I'd say we're in a good place. There are still some things that need to improve, to change, but we're working on it. It's the culture itself that is absolutely evolving and needs to change. But in my view, the cultural aspect takes time and the willingness to change.
Let me ask you this. Today, cuisine is evolving. Parmigiano-Reggiano makes me think of my grandmother cooking, grating Parmigiano-Reggiano over capelletti. Then there are new words like fusion. I know you've also tested some really unusual dishes with chefs.
Yes, for example, during COVID, we were supposed to hold an in-person masterclass, but obviously because of the lockdown, it couldn't happen. And this chef, who is now also an ambassador for the Parmigiano-Reggiano Consortium in the United States, Michele Casadei-Massari, suggested a recipe, though I should clarify, we were online at the time.
So you never tasted it?
No, I didn't taste it, but the dish really looked amazing. It made me really hungry.
The photos looked delicious.
Yes, it was raw red shrimp paired with this Parmigiano cream. Sure, it was a bold and risky pairing, but it turned out to be a real success. But beyond that, there's also the evolution of ethnicities, demographic changes. We absolutely have to offer Parmigiano-Reggiano even in contexts where we're not used to seeing it.
So speaking of overseas foreign markets, I've lived in Brazil, China, and the United States for many years. And what you find on the other side of the ocean is absolutely very different from what we experience here in Italy. What needs to be done? How do you deal with, let me say, this lack of food knowledge?
The only thing we can really do in a context like this, especially with the oceans that separate us, where it's not always possible to reach people directly, is to spread knowledge. That means relying on specialists who can help build awareness, explain the differences between a product like Parmigiano-Reggiano, which has PDO status, and other products that don't.
So Margherita, did you start out with Parmigiano-Reggiano?
Well, not exactly. I'd say our story goes back a bit further, so I'd say we can date it to the early 1900s, around 1910, when my father's grandfather, also named Leonida, was producing rennet and equipment for dairies. So that was the first company, which then split. One part continued producing rennet, while the other became the first MG in the 1950s, when my grandfather Arturo and Arnaldo Gruzza founded the first company, and then my father, who had to take over prematurely after his father passed away in 1970. Since that moment, he started a more industrial, more commercial activity. He began to expand and started packaging Parmigiano-Reggiano. So it's a story marked by many evolutions. And then came the insight to collect cream from the dairies because the local dairies had it as a natural byproduct every day. So a dedicated logistics system.
Because let's remember, collecting the rennet then needs to be delivered and processed very quickly.
Let me correct you. The rennet comes first. Here we're collecting cream. Here we're taking the fat that comes from skimming the milk at the dairy every morning. The milk used to make Parmigiano. We take the cream and make butter. But my father systematized all of this back when dairy sometimes really didn't even know what to do with it. So it was necessary to, let's say, place it at the right time, within the right time frame, and while preserving its organoleptic properties.
And doing this in the mid-1900s was truly something incredible, especially from a logistical standpoint. You probably gave inspiration to many major logistics companies.
Yes, someone may have borrowed the model a bit. I'm not saying they copied it. It's clearly a winning model, and it's been replicated, maybe even on a larger scale. But today, we're still proud to be among the best cream gatherers in the region.
Margherita, let's come back to you because you are a manager at Montanari Gruzza, but that's not all, since you also have a passion that extends into music. What does music mean to you, and what does it mean to bring music into the company?
I have always sung ever since I was a child, and I have always loved music. I needed to let off steam, to express a creativity and, let's say, in my opinion, an artistic soul that I have to some extent and that I also bring into the company. But today...
What kind of music?
Well, let's say I've gone through some changes, pop, rock, and now jazz. Jazz, which also helps me in a way to keep things under control. Power is nothing without control. So I also studied a lot to... develop certain techniques. Today, I'm happy with what I'm doing musically.
Let's talk about your life, about the company. What is it like for you to carry on this important name? Montanari, connected to Montanari Gruzza. What does it mean to you?
Well, certainly, if I have to, make a sort of summary of who I have been, who I have become, and what I want to do today, who I am within Montanari Gruzza, I can tell you that I am carrying on a story. I am carrying on a name, definitely two names, because Montanari Gruzza, well, those are two names that are still recognized and are very important, together with my, of course, colleagues and other family members. I feel I have a role. I feel I have a responsibility. I feel I have an honor. I have always believed that things should be earned and achieved through talent and, well, through merit, not just because of inherited rights. At the beginning, that's how I felt, and I wanted to prove that I was worthy and that I deserved this position. Today, I feel I can carry it forward with pride.
That's beautiful. We have decided to end our podcast by giving the final word to our guest. Would you like to leave us with a phrase?
Well, I would say something very simple. My name is Margherita Montanari, and every day I try to live up to this story.
Thank you, Margherita, for welcoming us into your home. And thank you all for tuning in. Until the next story. This was Stories of Italian Taste, the video podcast that tells the stories of the people, families, and businesses who have built Italy's food and wine heritage. It's hosted by Matteo Donelli and produced by Pindarica Communication. Thank you for being with us.